97 cases of community transmission.
24 of those were infectious in the community.
71 COVID patients have been admitted to hospital.
20 people in ICU, 4 of whom are ventilated.
And with numbers like that...
It always hurts to say this, but we need to extend the lockdown at least a further 2 weeks.
That includes home learning.
In Melbourne, 8 new cases announced today. 6 linked to the removalists who travelled from Sydney on red zone permits.
Books will be thrown when it's appropriate to throw them, and I'm exceptionally frustrated at the pace and transparency of information coming from the removalist.
With High Point Shopping Centre and the MCG among the growing list of exposure sites, Victorians are facing a familiar nervous wait.
The next 2 days are particularly critical, so I think we're right on the heels of this particular outbreak.
Back in Sydney, the majority of cases were in the southwest. A new directive requiring workers who leave their LGA to get tested every 3 days caused mayhem at Fairfield testing sites and a change of tack from the Premier.
I apologise if anyone was inconvenienced. If you don't have symptoms and you have to leave the area for work,
you can get tested near your workplace, and that is to take pressure off the system.
But still a lack of clarity of what constitutes essential work.
We've seen examples elsewhere in other jurisdictions where it amounted to absolute chaos when you try to define every single occupation.
As for what it'll take to get out of this...
24 people were infectious in the community. We need to get that down to as close to zero as possible.
But the chances of achieving that over the next 2 weeks are looking slim.
We will know at the end of 2 weeks to what extent we need to extend the lockdown.
It relies on all of us doing the right thing. We know the settings we have in place are the right settings. What we don't know is what proportion of the population will choose to follow those settings.
Bill Burchell is a strategic health policy consultant with the University of New South Wales and joins us once more. Bill, we just heard there the Premier say that her settings are right. It's up to the people to follow. Is that a reasonable position?
No, the settings are not great. In the last 24 hours, we've had 3 of Australia's most eminent epidemiologists and scientists, Brendan Crabb, Tony Blakely, Sharon Lewin, come out and say that in their view, Sydney has to progress to stage 4 restrictions. That is the only way in which we can go now to bring this outbreak under control and obliterate COVID in the shortest possible time. And the New South Wales government adamantly refuses to do that and is adding to the confusion by taking a very strange approach to even the most logical thing, which is to define what essential workers are. There was no direction or definition from the government, and we saw what happened in Fairfield.
Why do you think they're not going to a harder lockdown? I mean, it's sort of easy to say this is political and this is what the New South Wales government has kind of set itself up as, but they do have a public health team that is giving them expert advice, and presumably they're comfortable with the current settings.
Well, I think, regrettably, what we're seeing is the public health professionals, they know what needs to be done. I think the New South Wales Cabinet is not moving quickly to implement the only public health solution that can work. Now, I think it comes to the idea that somehow there's the economy on one side and public health on the other. And if you are too harsh on the public health side, as it were, you'll make a mess of the economy. Well, tell that to the hundreds of thousands of small businesses whose livelihoods are being smashed in Sydney. Tell that to the workers who are being dismissed. I mean, if we get the public health right, the economy will suffer the least possible damage in Sydney and recover as fast as it can when we get back to zero. But the Premier's still not even committing to a zero outcome now. She's saying, well, we'll get to something like zero.
What about in Victoria? 8 cases today, all linked to the Sydney outbreak. How pessimistic should Victorians be?
Well, they should be realistic. I think pessimism is a very bad emotion. Let's be optimistic. Let's follow the science. I'm sure the Victorian government, in common with every other government in Australia, is keeping an eagle eye on any possible outbreak. And the moment they see it, they're going to move swiftly and decisively to clobber it. We've seen that WA has moved again in the last few hours to stop Victorian travellers into WA. And I think Tasmania has done much the same thing in the last few hours. But that urgency really doesn't seem to be manifesting itself in the actions of the New South Wales government. So, look, I hope Victoria will move swiftly. I'm sure they will. But we can't be complacent, and we certainly can't be complacent when only 10%, less than 10% of all Australians tonight are fully vaccinated.
From expert opinions to in-depth analysis and reporting, the Project YouTube brings you the biggest stories from Australia and around the globe. Hit the subscribe button now for news delivered straight to your feed.